for Thursday, May 8th, 2025 at approximately 1:30. And this is of the Rancho Mirage City Council and Community Services District, Energy Authority, Housing Authority, Joint Powers Finance Authority, Library and Observatory and Redevelopment Successor Agency Boards. I will now ask you to please join me in a flag salute to our country. Place your right hand over your heart and say as follows. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Downs?
I'm here.
Councilmember Fromberg Edelstein?
I'm here.
Councilmember O'Keefe?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mulatto?
Here.
Mayor Weil?
Here. We are moving public comments that now will follow the discussion items. So we're going to go directly into the discussion items, which is the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2025-2026 and 2026 and 2027. And the presentation will be by Kofi Atobam, our Director of Administrative Services. Kofi, if you would, please.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So I'll request that the IT folks pull up the presentation for me. But as that is happening, we are here this afternoon to discuss the city's preliminary budget for fiscal years 2025-2026 and 2026-2027. This preliminary budget was posted on the city's website on April 28, 2025, and copies of the budget can also be found at City Hall and at the library. But before I go into my presentation, I just want to acknowledge a few individuals. I want to say a big thank you to our city manager, Isaiah. It takes a lot to put this budget together. And his direction, his leadership, his guidance in putting this document together was very, very, very great. And so I just want to say, Isaiah, thank you for the guidance in getting this document to where we have it today. I also want to say a big thank you to the department directors and all the staff liaisons within each department. They do a lot of heavy lifting in the back. Behind the scenes, there are a lot of things that needs to be done, schedules that needs to be completed, numbers that need to be analyzed and vetted. And so I want to say a big thank you to all those who were involved in the various departments in getting this document to where it is today. So today's presentation is going to be at a higher level overview of the detailed budget that was provided to each one of you on April 28th and also posted on the city's website. So on your screen is just an overview of what we're going to be going through today. We're going to review the various fund types that we have in our budget. We're also going to look at some cost pressures that influenced this budget that we have before you today. We're going to also be presenting an overview of the general fund. And then also within that, we'll highlight a few items of significance in the general fund within the various divisions, as well as some other special revenue funds. We're also going to give a little overview of 3 of our special revenue funds, which is the Library and Observatory, the Housing Authority, and Rancho Mirage Energy Authority. And then at the end, we're going to discuss our capital projects. So to begin with, in governmental accounting, there are 3 main categories of funds. There's what we call the governmental funds, proprietary funds, and fiduciary funds. Now, within our city, we don't have any fiduciary funds. And so what I'm focusing on here today is just the fund types that we have within the city of Rancho Mirage. most of our funds are general governmental funds. And within the governmental funds, there is what we call the general fund, special revenue funds. We have debt service funds. We have capital projects funds. Within our city, we don't have debt service funds or capital project funds because those are funds that are restricted or designed to specifically account for capital projects. Let's say we issue bonds that are specific to a capital project that we are doing. Those are accounted for in the governmental capital projects funds. And if we issue debt for whatever reason, we also have debt service funds that basically bring in the resources that are repaying for those debts. But as a city, we don't have any bonded debt, so we are not focusing on those today. So in front of you is the first column there is our general fund. Basically, what the general fund does is accounting for all financial resources within the city and expenditures for public purposes that are not restricted in nature. So if there are no restrictions on the funds that are coming in and they are going to be used for general public purposes, those are accounted for in the general fund. Now, for special revenue funds, those are funds that are has some sort of restrictions on them. Basically, the funding that comes in for those funds are restricted in nature. They can only be used for specific items or for specific type of expenditures. So in our city, an example would be like the Measure A fund, the gas tax fund, and some other funds that we have within our city. Those resources are restricted for specific uses, and those are accounted for in the special revenue fund. Another fund type that we have is we have one proprietary fund, and that fund type is an enterprise fund. Basically, what the enterprise fund does is just like your normal private business out there. Enterprise funds account for resources that comes in and are used for specific expenditures. But those funds are just run like the normal business out there, whereby money coming in, it's funding for the expenditures, and the idea is that the funds that are coming in are going to take care of those expenses so that the general fund is not the fund that is funding those expenses. So those are the three fund types that we have within our city, and those are the funds that are going to be discussed in this budget. Now, specifically to our general fund, the budget is broken down into two segments. There is the operating side and the non-operating side. And so the way I try to talk about it is the operating side is just like your normal checking account that you have in your personal life. The operating side of the budget is accounting for regular or reoccurring revenues that are coming in and expenditures that are going out. That is what the operating side of the budget accounts for. And so for our purposes, or for our purpose here at the city, it's revenues or fees that we collect at the counter, sales tax revenues that comes in. Those are all considered operating revenues. And then on the expenditure side, utility bills, contracted services, and salaries and benefits are also considered operating expenses. And then on the non-operating side, those are just like our savings account, where you are saving money and putting money to the side for some infrequent and one-time revenues or expenses. That is what the non-operating side of the budget accounts for. So in our case, we usually sometimes will apply for grants, and we get some grants coming in to fund specific projects and stuff like that. That is what is accounted for in the non-operating side of the budget, as well as capital projects that we fund as the years go by. And so primarily, when you talk about the operating budget, the main purpose of the operating budget is to actually show if there is any structural issues or problems within our city's finances. And so when you look at the operating budget and it's, you are not running deficits on the operating side, it shows that, structurally, things are in a better shape. And then when you add the non-op side, non-op, because those are infrequent and one-time projects or expenditures, sometimes those are the ones that tends the operating into a deficit, whereby you have to dip into your reserves or get other funding sources to be able to fund those expenditures. In developing the budget, that is before you today, we realize that, overall costs have risen significantly, whether in our private lives, our personal lives, and as a city. Costs in general have gone up. But in looking at our budget, we try to look at what are some of the significant costs that we as a city incur. And so there are only three that I kind of felt were significant in developing this budget. And those are the three that you see on this screen that I just want to touch on a little bit. So that first section there, we see police. We try to compare the last 4 years, 4 years ago versus the year one budget that we are presenting before you today. Over that 4-year period, you can see that police expenses, our public safety, police side of the public safety budget, has actually increased 42% over a 4-year period. Now, that is because of increases in contracted rates. That's also because we added a dedicated lieutenant to our operations. And overall, it's just general increases in the contract for public safety. When you look at the fire side, it went up. Over the 4-year period, we're looking at 74%. And
since our lieutenant's in the room, I'll just note he was a small part of that overall increase.
All right. Yes, that was just a little part of
Appreciate you, sir.
It's not you, Lieutenant. Thank you. So on the fire side, again, 74% over the 4-year period. And that is mainly driven, again, by an additional medic unit that we added, increases in contract rates, and then, our city switched from to the municipal staffing module where, changes in existing positions or existing positions are replaced with a higher staffing level in order to give us, as a city, more experienced force. That is what the municipal module actually does. And then the other component, which amongst the three that you see on the screen increased significantly over the 4 years, is our insurance. And I know in our own lives, again, in our private lives, we can attest to the fact that insurance rates have just skyrocketed. And it's no different for the city. Some of the driving force within the insurance market, especially on our side of things, is that cyber security insurance have actually shot up due to, as we hear in the news, and most of the time we hear about cyber security threats and some governmental agencies being hacked, and they've been asked to give up a ransom before they can get their files and stuff back. We, as a city, through our IT department and the safeguards that we put in place, we are safe on that side, at least up till this time. But those expenses or those claims are affecting insurance rates. And so our cybersecurity costs have risen. And one other thing that is also influencing the increase in insurance costs is that insurance carriers within California are having it difficult. Most insurance carriers are leaving the state because of some of the regulations we have. And so we have the universe or the population of insurance carriers is shrinking. And as that shrinks, it leaves us with a few insurance companies out there who are willing to insure organizations. And that is also driving up costs. And so you see that 106% increase in insurance costs over the last 4 years. And recently I was in a meeting, and there is no... this cost is not going to be coming down anytime soon. It's just one of those things that is going on in the market as we have it now. Now, at the bottom of the screen, I just wanted to say that just these three expenses or cost categories over the 4 years have increased about 60%, or 11 million. But when you compare the increases on the revenue side, our revenues have only increased about 14%. And so you can see clearly that just using these three cost categories, our revenues are nowhere keeping up with our expenses. this screen here is basically presenting the budget that we have before you today. And so that middle column is talking about fiscal year 2025, 2026. And then the last column is talking about fiscal year 2026, 2027. And so as you can see, we are projecting operating revenues for the first budget year to be approximately 37 million, and operating expenditures approximately 35.8 million. And that leads us to an operating surplus of 1.3 million, approximately 1.3 million. And on the non-op side, we are expecting some grant revenue to come in to help fund some projects. And so we are projecting about 660,000 in non-operating revenues, and then non-operating expenditures, which are mainly capital projects, which are going to be discussed in later slides, account for that 4.5 million. But of that 4.5 million, I just want to state that a significant part of that amount, about 3 million of it, it's for the IID substation. And that is what is driving up the non-operating expenditures. And so when you take the non-operating expenditures versus the non-operating revenues, there is a deficit of approximately 3.9 million. And so netting that, combining the non-operating deficit of 3.9 and the operating surplus of 1.3, we net out, or we are projecting that at the end of the first fiscal year, the first budget year, we are looking at an operating, a total deficit of 2.6 million, which basically are going to be drawn out of reserves to fund these projects. The same holds true on the second year of the budget. And so that second year of the budget, as you can see, we are projecting total revenues of about 38.8 million, total operating expenses of approximately 37.5 million, for an operating surplus of about 1.3 million. And then on that same note, on the non-op side, we are not projecting any revenues at this point, but we're projecting expenditures of about 2.4 million. And of that, 2 million is also related to the IID substation. And so at the end of the second year, based on what we are presenting today, we are projecting a total deficit of about 1.1 million that is going to be coming out of reserves.
Hey, Kofi, can I make a point on that last slide? So, you know, we've heard a lot about affordable housing and the need for it and how critical it is. And so, you know, I just want to correlate what you see in this proposed budget with some of those goals that the council has established. So if the city did not get involved with that IID substation, there would be no capacity and affordable housing would not develop. It just wouldn't. They can barely get their projects to fund now without overcoming an extreme scenario like go build a substation. So the whole driver behind the city getting involved with the IID substation and putting the money in so that there's capacity so that this affordable housing can develop is for that exact reason. It will not get built if we don't do this. So this, you know, although it's tough to say, hey, you know, if you pulled out that IID substation, right, that bottom number, we would actually put money into reserves, right? So what this budget is telling you, hey, everything that the city is doing would have been funded within the money that we received for the year, and actually we would put a little bit away without this IID substation project. When you put in the IID substation project, so $3 million in budget year 1 and $2 million in budget year 2, that is what is driving the use of city reserves. Now, obviously, we have reserves for a purpose, and there have been years when the council has decided, hey, this is an appropriate use of reserves because we're delivering whatever it was to the community. We are investing that money back in for these purposes, and we feel like, you know, that's why it's there. So during COVID, right? We did a lot of programs, and a lot of that was funded out of our reserves. So this is one of those cases where when you look at our budget, you do see the priorities of the council when it comes to affordable housing, driving the use of some of our city reserves. So obviously with the level of need and priority that has been given, that is why you see this use of reserves being driven by that IID substation project. Because without it, you wouldn't have your affordable housing developed.
Thank you, Isaiah. So this next slide is just basically showing you how the projected deficit is flowing through our reserves. And so we are projecting that at the end of the current fiscal year 2024-2025, we are projecting total reserves of approximately 67.3 million. And so when you run the total deficit projected for budget year 1 through the reserves, it leaves us, we are projecting that at the end of the first budget year, we are projecting total reserves of approximately 64.7 million. And so the same thing when you shift it on to the second year, budget year 2, we are projecting at the end of budget year 2 to have a total reserve of approximately 63.5 million. Now, this slide here is, this slide and the next slide is just basically giving us a graphical picture of how the revenue that comes in, where they come from. And then we'll go on to the other one, which shows how we spend the money. And so as you can see on the screen, sales tax and bed tax, which is the TOT tax, those two revenue sources account for 50% of the general fund revenues, which clearly shows that our city is very, very dependent on tourism, because sales tax and bed tax revenues account for 50% of our revenue. And then the next major source of revenue is the revenues we get from our CFD1, which is specifically dedicated to fund public safety. And so in this budget, it accounts for 16% of the total revenue that comes into the general fund. And then we have interest income, we have other revenues, and a few other revenues, as you can see on there. But I just wanted to point out that between sales tax, TOT, and the CFD, that is a chunk of the revenues that we get in operating our city. This chart here shows you where the money goes, the money that comes in, where this money goes. And as you can see here, 49% of the projected budget for the first budget year goes to public safety. I know that is a priority for this council, and public safety is something significant for our community. And so this clearly shows that, you know, we are putting our money where our priorities are. And then the other sections you see on there are the various departments and how much of the budget is allocated to those departments. So the next few slides that we're going to be going through, as you can see, the budget document is a big document. It's several pages. And so we pulled out a few items that we believe are significant and that we need to bring to your attention, or we need to just let you know that we are continuing to do those things within the budget. And so the next few items, we're going to touch on a few expenses or a few items that are in the budget for that purpose. On page 41 of the budget book that you received, specifically account division 4100, account 7404, it's basically where we account for our police services. And so just like I said earlier on, those costs have increased. And so in the first year of the budget, we are actually projecting an increase estimated increase in rates and public safety costs of about 9.5%. And then the second year, just based on prior trends and everything, we are projecting that those expenses are going to increase about 6%.
So how the contract rates work, right? That 9.5% increase, that's just on the bodies you have, right? Those aren't increased services. So the way that our contract rate increases work through the Sheriff's Department is, there's some recent articles about this going through right now. So about March, April of each year, they tell us what our contract rate increase is going to be for the current year. And then they retro that back to the beginning of the fiscal year. And so about 9 months into your fiscal year, they will come and say, hey, so this year it was 7%. So this year we got a 7% rate increase. And then they retro that back to July 1, the start of the fiscal year. And then they'll give us a projected increase for next year. And so that 9.5% increase is what they told us as what their estimate is for the increase after that. Now, they don't give a year two projection. We put one in just kind of based on some of the factors that we can look at. So most of the cost, a lot of the cost is driven through, labor increases, insurance increases. One of the things that I like to talk about is, sometimes they'll report, whatever that contract rate is or an overtime rate, right? And recognize that that rate isn't what the officer's getting paid. So just like the city has administrative overheads, well, so does the Sheriff's Department. So our contract rates not only cover the officers that are serving our community and what they cost, but it also covers the administrative costs, the insurance costs. So within these rates, there's charges from, the county. And the county provides services to the Sheriff's Department, which then those costs get put into our rates. So county IT, as an example, that's whatever gets charged to the Sheriff's Department will get wrapped into our rates. And so it's not just what the deputies make, it's the overhead structure that also supports the Sheriff's Department and charges from the county. And so when you break it and get into it, there's a lot of moving pieces to these rates, which is kind of why it works the way it does, where you see it get retroed back, for 9 or so months, and you don't find out what the actual increase is until about 9 months into your fiscal year. So it is a very complicated process that the county has to go through in order to determine the exact rate increase that you're going to get.
Question. So this includes the 7% that we've read about in the paper the last couple of days.
Because that's current year.
Yeah,
costs,
current year,
so
right.
when we project forward, you take current year plus whatever.
But it's also, I think, important to note, and I assume this is the case when you put the budget together, that this assumes our current level of staffing for law enforcement. This does not include one additional hour of law enforcement services for the future. So our costs are going to go up this much just to stay where we are, even though population is going to grow in this city.
Correct.
Can we all right, thank you. And so going through the public safety budget for Division 4100, you see that in account 8800 on page 42, there is operating transfers out. Now, this basically accounts for, the revenue that comes in for public safety is all accounted for in this Division 4100, but the fire fund is in a different fund. The fire activity is in a different fund. And so there's usually an operating transfer that goes out of the general fund into the fire fund to ensure that the fire expenses or the fire cost is taken care of, basically bringing it down to a zero fund balance at the end of each year. And so that is what that account accounts for. On the in that same division, account 8801 is accounting for non-operating transfers out, and that is specifically in budget year 1, 310,000 is to fund the replacement of an existing ambulance, and that's what that cost in that account is. Now, in Division 21,000, which is our planning division, we just thought these two items are some items that we wanted to highlight. In budget year 2, there is about 20,000 budgeted to update our housing element. And then in budget year 1, there is 40,000 allocated for the Highway 111 specific plan. In Division 3100, approximately 205,000 is budgeted to ensure that our core maintenance and repair functions are continuing and are all on, and it also accounts for our on-call maintenance contracts to ensure that our maintenance and everything that we have going on in the city is still going as planned. For facilities maintenance, Division 3300, about 150,000 of that budget, it's earmarked for ongoing maintenance of mechanical infrastructure within City Hall. And the general government, specifically this item relates to insurance that I've already kind of talked about. So in budget year 1, estimated increase of 19% is projected based on the renewal data that the city received from our insurance carrier. It's projected that insurance rates or insurance expenses is going to go up about 19% in this first year. And then in the second year, we are projecting about 15% increase just based on our recent claim history and expense pattern. Division 53,000 is our regional planning expenses. And specifically in there, every year the city allocates about 150,000 to fund homelessness activities. And so for budget year 1 and budget year 2, we are continuing to allocate 150,000 for homelessness funding within the region. In the finance division, Division 5500, there is about 60,000 budgeted for the division to conduct a development impact fee and nexus study. So every 5 years, the city is required to conduct, do a development impact fee study. And so the last one we did, this current fiscal year we are in is the last year. And so we are budgeting within that first budget year, 25-26 fiscal year, 60,000 to do that.
Kofi, I just want to make a point really quick on those fee studies is, you know, it's important to keep this up. So one of the important aspects that we've talked about is, hey, we don't need a third fire station right now, but at some point we will. And so we do have a development impact fee that does collect money for future fire facilities, which would include a third fire station. The reason it's important to update these studies on a regular basis is, you know, as you look at the post-COVID world, and just how costs have increased. Our neighbors to the east, Palm Desert, just built a new fire station, and it is substantially more than what we have estimated in our diff fee study. And so when we do these updates, we get the opportunity to go back and say, okay, yes, you know, the third fire station isn't new, but it's also the opportunity to reflect what that is actually going to cost. And so by doing these fee impact studies, it allows us to collect an appropriate amount from development for their fair share of the impact on the services.
Thank you. So moving on, Division 56,000 is our information services division. And that department in the budget, there are 3 segments there that I just want to highlight. We have some funds earmarked for hardware replacement. You know, the industry standard or best practices require that you don't wait till your systems become obsolete before you replace them. And so this 65,000 each of the 2 fiscal years is being earmarked to help replace the hardware for the various systems that we have within the city. And also within the budget, budget year 1, there are some funds that are earmarked to enhance our cybersecurity stuff. And so basically, these funds are going to be used to implement advanced threat detection tools for the city, as well as expand endpoint protection and system monitoring, just so we ensure that our systems are not vulnerable to some of these hacking and stuff that goes on out there. So that the first budget year, 140,000 is budgeted for that, and then the second year, 150,000 is budgeted for the security enhancement activities. Cloud services and business continuity upgrades, we are budgeting 250,000 in each of the fiscal years to enhance those items. In Division 72,000 is our community relations. That's where we account for all the stuff that we do within our community. And so for, as you can see, the city continues to support our Chamber of Commerce. And so for both fiscal years, both budget years, we are earmarking 145,000 to support activities of the Chamber. We are also budgeting in the first fiscal year, 24-25, 135,000 for an economic development study.
May I ask a question?
All right.
So, is the economic development study, is that in account 7476, community economic development? 7476 on page 52.
Yes.
Yeah, correct.
So
Yes.
why is it 225,000 instead of 135?
Because that's also where we're putting in the shop local,
Got it.
the shop local.
Okay, thank you.
So that's
understand.
all community development.
Correct. Correct. So then the 135 there, and what we are budgeting for the shop local, the Rancho Mirage gift card, which is the next item on the last column, those are all accounted for in that account. So the first fiscal year, we are allocating 95,000, and then the second year, we are allocating 105,000 towards our shop local gift card program. And then in both fiscal years, we are allocating 250,000 towards amphitheater programming. So those are the items that we wanted to highlight in the general fund. Now I'm just transitioning to some special revenue funds, and we'll just touch on a few of them. Again, the first one is Fund 215, which is where we actually account for all the activity related to our fire services. And so, like I've explained before, the increases in that fund is mainly due to addition of a third medic unit, switching our staffing module to the municipal module, and contract rate increases in general. Fund 218 is our Parkland Fund. And what we just wanted to highlight on here is that this fund, basically, money's coming and they are used for parkland activity expenses. The rate at which revenues are coming in and the expenses that we are incurring, basically what's been happening year over year is that the revenues that come in are enough to fund the operations or the activity of our parkland expenses. However, I wanted to point out that going forward, or if there is any major capital project that the city needs to embark on relating to parkland, we are most likely not going to have enough revenue to be able to take care of those capital projects, and that may likely be funded out of the general fund. The other special revenue fund that we wanted to touch on is the gas tax fund. This fund is strictly, the resources in this fund are strictly earmarked for roadways, street maintenance, and street projects. And so for the first budget year, we are estimating that the revenues that come in and the expenses that we are going to be incurring is basically going to zero out our fund balance in that fund for the first fiscal year. In the second budget year, currently no capital projects have been budgeted for, and the idea is that we want to grow back our fund balance in those funds so that we can use the funding down the road for other capital projects or street-related projects. The development impact fee funds, those are about 9 or 10 funds that are combined together, funds 350 to 359, and basically, at the end of the current fiscal year, we are projecting about 5.7 million in fund balance in all the diff funds combined. However, we just wanted to draw attention to the fact that by the end of the second year, we are looking at a fund balance of about 3.4 million. And this is mainly driven by the fact that we are using these funds for their intended purposes. It's being used to fund projects and activity that those funds are earmarked to be used for. And I believe once we get to the capital projects, we'll hear a little bit more about that. The next fund that we want to talk about is our library and observatory. And so this is just a high overview of fund balance and projected activity within the library fund for the next 2 years. And so in the middle of the screen, as you can see, there are 3 columns. The middle column says Fund 242, and that is our library and observatory fund. In this fund, we account for everything related to the library directly. And so the first column in that section, fiscal year 24-25, we're estimating that at the end of this fiscal year, there will be about 4.3 million in fund balance for the library fund. And then rolling that forward, we are projecting that for 2025-2026 budget year, we are looking at about 4.8 million in revenues and then a spending of 4.9 million. So at the end of the first budget year, we are projecting an approximately 4.17 million in fund balance. And then rolling that forward to the second budget year, projecting a revenue of about 4.8 million and then expenditure of about 5.1 million, leaving a fund balance of approximately 3.9 million. Now, the column to the last column on the screen, like the third column, that is just showing us similar information, but for the library foundation, which is the 501c3 that raises funds in support of what we do at our library. And so currently, in the current fiscal year, we are projecting that fund is going to have about 2.6 million in fund balance. And then at the end of the second year, the first budget year, we are projecting about 2.4 million in fund balance. And then the third year, or the second budget year, we are projecting about 2.3 million. Now, you may ask the question, that fund balance is going down. It's because certain projects and activity supporting the library are being budgeted out of there, and which are going to be talked about on the next slide. This is just, our library continues to be a hub of learning and discovery for our community. And so the budget that is presented for the library in Fund 242 is ensuring that we continue to provide astronomy experiences, STEM-focused tours for our school kids, theater programming, youth theater programming, the STEAM Reads and Summer Reading Club programs that we have. The budget is presented or prepared in a way to continue to support these activities. And as part of the budget for the first year, on January 7, 2026, that date will be the 30th anniversary of our library. And so in the budget, and then 20 years of the library in its current facility. And so about 15,000 is budgeted to take care of that celebration. This other screen column is talking about activities in the foundation, Fund 243. And as I kind of indicated earlier, Fund 243 raises funds and supports activity of the library. And so in each of the budget years, each of those years, about 225,000 is budgeted in the foundation fund to continue funding the library collection activities, which is our books, e-books, and all those electronic resources that we use at the library. As part of the expenses presented in the library foundation for the next 2 fiscal years is capital improvement projects for the library. So over the years, most of the capital improvement activity happens or are taken care of in Fund 242, which is the library fund. But as we know, the Library Foundation raises money to help with fund and activities in the library fund, and we, in the next 2 fiscal years, are budgeting for some of the capital improvement projects to be funded out of the Library Foundation Fund.
Kofi, before we go to the Housing Authority, can you go back to the summary of 242 and 243? Yep. So, I think this demonstrates the importance of our foundation. And so, as we all know up here, the library is a great place. It's programming. We really can't go in our community or even outside our community without somebody commenting to us how great of a facility that is. And a huge component of that success is the foundation. The foundation raising that money to help support free programming and the activities of the library is critically important. And those resident volunteers that are on that board that help raise money for our library, thank you so much. Just know you're making a huge difference for that facility. So imagine if we didn't have that foundation that was raising money, and if you go to 243 and you look at the expenditures that 243 does on behalf of our library, imagine sliding that amount over into 242, right? So in budget year number 1, imagine seeing another $641,000 on the expenditure line in Fund 242. In budget year number 2, imagine seeing another $641,000, almost $642,000 in that expenditure line for 242. You would erode the reserves in that library fund very quickly. Since I've been with the city about 13 years ago, we've always talked about trying to preserve the library fund and keep that facility in a high-class manner. And one of the reasons the big part of the reason that we've been able to do that is this library foundation. And so, I didn't want this time to pass without recognizing the important work that board does on behalf of our library. And frankly, it wouldn't be the place it is today without that foundation.
I think another important item to note is that $641,000 that gets spent in those 2 budget years is covered by $500,000 that's raised by the foundation. Absent the foundation, that $500,000 would not be raised.
Yep.
Thank you.
So this next slide is just giving a high-level overview of our housing authority. And so in the housing authority, there are a couple of funds in there. Fund 280 accounts mainly for activities of the housing authority as an entity. And then funds 281 through 281, 283, 284, and 285 accounts for the 4 facilities or properties that we have. And so what you see on this screen, Fund 280, which is the main fund for the Housing Authority, is projecting about $5.8 million in the current fiscal year in fund balance. The first budget year, 25-26, it's projecting a fund balance of about $4.2 million. And then the second budget year, we are projecting a fund balance of about $2.7 million. Now, on the right side of your screen, the third column up there, that is just a combination of all the 4 funds for the 4 properties. Combined, we are projecting a $3.6 million at the end of this current fiscal year in fund balance. And then the first budget year, in total for all 4 properties, we are looking at about $3.27 million in fund balance, basically revenue that is coming in, which is mainly made up of rents. As you can see, that first budget year, there's projection of about $2.8 million coming in, but expenditures are $3.2 million. That clearly shows that the revenues that are coming in are not enough to take care of the operations of the various properties that we have. And then the same thing happens when you move it over to the next budget year, the second budget year, we are projecting a fund balance of about 3.4 million. At the bottom of the screen is just showing a breakdown of the fund balance by property. That's what it's showing. So as you can see, it's showing that Parkview Villas is projecting about 177,000 in fund balance at the end of the current fiscal year. And then the first budget year, it has about 21,715 fund balance, and same for the second budget year. Whispering Waters, you don't see any fund balance there because specifically for that property, there's always subsidy going in there to be able to fund the expenses in that facility.
Kofi?
Yes, sir.
Just go back to that screen again, if you would. Just give us a quick overview as to what is included in Fund 280 versus 281, 83, 84, and 85. What revenues, what happens in those various funds?
Think of 280 as the general fund for the housing authority. And so 280 has our housing manager, right?
Okay.
The common expenses.
I understand. And the other ones are for the specific properties.
Exactly. So rent and expenses for those properties.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So again, just wanted to highlight that as part of those, the expenditures for the specific housing, for properties, for budget year one, we are budgeting about $1,265,000 for some renovations and work in the 4 properties. So renovation of the clubhouse, exterior painting, lighting, and paving are projected to be done in that first fiscal year, which is why you see that fund balance dropping. The second budget year, we are projecting about we are allocating $545,000 to continue or to complete these capital improvement projects in the housing authority properties. So at this point, the next account or fund that I want to talk about is the proprietary fund or the enterprise fund, which is our Rancho Mirage Energy Authority. Again, this is just giving an overview of the energy authority as well. So first, fiscal year 24-25, we are projecting a fund balance or ending fund balance of about 21.5 million in the energy authority. And then rolling that into the first budget year, we are projecting revenues of about 35 million in revenues, and then expenditures of about 34.7 million, leaving a fund balance of 21.8 million. And then in the second budget year, projecting a fund balance of 23.1 million. Now, to the extreme right of your screen is just, we just wanted to highlight a few things. Since inception, or since the Energy Authority was established, it saved its customers, which are our residents, over 3 million in direct savings. And then from the various programs that we are able to provide our residents, especially the rebates program, the solar rebates and all the other rebates programs that the authority established, we've been able to give back or put money back into the community of about 1 million. Currently, there are 3 rebate programs that the Energy Authority offers. And so for our solar energy stuff, you can get up to 5,500 in rebates for residential energy efficiency upgrades. You can also get up to 1,650 for home battery storage, and then up to $550 if you install a level 2 EV charger station. And overall, for our residents or customers of the Energy Authority, all the customers who are in the Green Choice program or participates in that gets an overall 10% bonus by opting into that program. And so this is a general overview of the Energy Authority and how things are progressing in that function. At this point, I'm going to turn over to Assistant City Manager Ryan to discuss the capital projects.
All right. Thanks, Kofi. If I could get that PowerPoint back up, that'd be. There we go. All right. A bit of kind of background before we get into the meat and potatoes of each project. The next 2-year capital budget has been put together with the thought process of minimizing the impact of general fund by use of our special revenue accounts and/or developer impact fees that are available for specific projects that are allowable for those. And the kind of overall mission or the overall sentiment we wanted to leave you with, and as you've heard through this entire presentation Kofi has left, is capital projects will continue to be difficult to fund at current revenue levels. Basically, as you're seeing, our revenues coming in are covering our basic overall operations, but projects will continue to be a challenge. I wanted to also note that there are 3 projects that we have discussed with the council that are not included in this budget because, frankly, I don't have funding put together for them yet, but we do have sort of grants and or funding mechanisms we're in process on. Interconnect Phase 2, which is the signal synchronization for the balance of the city, as we've talked about. The cost of undergrounding fiber has continued to escalate, and in talking to our peers from other agencies, we're seeing a staggering increase in that project. So we're seeking some grant sources that could help us with that. And end of next week, we should be submitting a grant application that could be substantial to that project. The Vista del Sol roadway construction, again, we have been talking about this for some time, and as costs have escalated, we're going to be seeking a formation of an assessment district and going out and talking to the property owners about self-assessing for those properties. And then also, city manager mentioned a lot of the costs associated with helping get the affordable housing off the ground. Well, one of the large costs of kind of opening up that land is the construction of Via Vale and the associated sewer, water, utility work that has to go into that. We're estimating that expenditure at approximately $5 million, and we do have an application for funding in with Congressman Calvert's office and are awaiting notification of whether that award was made or not. So again, we're seeking sources that limit the impact to the general fund to the extent that we can. So in the next year, 25-26 budget, we have the public parking lot improvements, which, as many of you know, is over by the Rancho Mirage Community Park. Lands have been assembled. Plans are at 90%, meaning we're just about at a biddable set of documents. The estimated cost is currently $3 million, and I've listed the funding sources that are plentiful. We've got 4 different funding sources, ranging from general license tax dollars to our parkland fund, which has some disposable capital dollars, and transportation and general government facilities will help fund that project. Our annual pavement rehabilitation program, we're looking at approximately $2 million expenditure, and we're looking at the use of both gas tax and Measure A funds. We're still making good progress on the Frank Sinatra low water crossing. Even though you see the number 30% there, we're in design working with CVWD on hydrology, and that's really what impact would our design have on the flow of the Whitewater River Channel. And I'll be honest with you, we've been having some very good discussions with CVWD on that project. I think that it's really just a time issue at this point. But we're seeking some design dollars out of the general fund in year 1, and we're looking to fund the eventual construction out of Measure A and DIF fee transportation funding. We're also seeking grant funding. This is an active transportation project at its core. There's a lot of ATP dollars out there, and Jeff in our office is looking for those constantly. We're also just about ready to put out to bid a project that's been on the books for a very long time, but it's a very minor amendment out in the north area. It's at Bob Hope and Ramon will be installing a free right-hand turn coming southbound into the city and off the freeway. And also within that project is some sand fencing relocation and removal up on Dinah Shore east of Bob Hope. So those 2 projects got combined, and we have a grant that funds approximately $700,000 of the $800,000 cost estimate.
Ryan, are you telling us that these various costs for these capital improvement projects, you've identified various sources of funds, so that's already plugged into this budget?
Yes. And then we keep some general sources of funding available to us on an annual basis. As this council has seen, items come up throughout the year, and you expect us to be able to move fairly rapidly when a project comes up. A good example of that is the pickleball renovation over at Rancho Mirage Community Park. If we didn't have some annual dollars set aside, not that it's impossible, but it would make the budget impact at the end of the year a little bit harder to swallow. So we do keep some accounts coming from general fund and our parkland fund just to make sure that there are dollars there. These don't always get used, but they are there for the occasional project that comes up. We do know that we have some work to do at City Hall related to mechanical systems. Those are already included in the budget. Those are not additional costs. They're in already. And just real quick before we leave, as you note, we go through each project. We're trying to limit the use of Fund 101, which is your general fund. And that's not always, the intent, but we do have some of these special revenue funds that can help us limit the impact of the general fund, and that's the way we've set this budget up. Now, that's great because we can draw down those special revenue accounts, but they are not refilled at as rapidly a pace as we might want them to. So it's a good trick. It's a good way to help us get projects built, but it's not a forever solution, just to be aware. And with that, that concludes,
that concludes our presentation, and staff will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I do have questions about other capital projects that we need to face as time goes by. So we've talked about the substation at IID. That's going to be about $5 million over the next couple of years. What about the cost of the fire station? What is that going to cost us, and where is that funding going to come from?
So, we can, I guess, take Palm Desert as the example of estimated cost. But again, that was a pretty sizable fire station for Palm Desert. And so if ours was scaled down because it didn't need that many bays, then you would start to limit the cost. But essentially, that's still very early on in the process, right? Because the fire folks, fire professionals, CAL FIRE says, hey, you don't need it yet, which is why we took the medium step of adding the third ambulance. Because they said what you really need is more support in your ambulance response times. When we add that third fire station, you're adding a third fire engine. You're required to add a third fire engine, and they tell us you don't need a third fire engine yet. And so this middle step of getting the third ambulance operating out of the current fire station, when we do make that step, you would look to, your DIF fund for the construction of that fire station. You would look to your general fund for the construction of that fire station. Not likely you're going to receive any state or federal dollars for that, but you could potentially receive maybe some support from other governmental entities in the area. So, potentially we might partner with Agua Caliente. They are a huge supporter of our public safety, not just ours, but everywhere within the reservation or the cities where they have the reservation. So that could be a possible source. But you would begin to piece it together over several years. But again, that's still very early on with where we're at within the need of that third fire station.
Sure. Okay. What I'll do now is I will call for public comments. I'll come back to council comments. Christy, are there any requests for public comments, which is an opportunity to speak on items on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker?
Isaiah Harris.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem. council members and staff. Certainly was an incredible task that seems that folks have ahead here in terms of working out the budget. You've done a phenomenal job with it. Certainly the questions I have was about the sheriffs and their costs. I mean, the stuff I just read a couple of days ago, and you know, Isaiah done a great job. So answering the question, so I won't ask that question, but I'll ask this. It seems to me that the contract that we have with the sheriff's department is a cost reimbursable contract. Is that fair to say? Yeah. Okay. Because you know, I would assume that we had signed up for some fixed services and then next year they'd increase it, but you know, we know what our cost is going in, but right now we make an estimate based on what they think it might be. So my question is, how close have they been with respect to what their estimate is versus their actual? I mean, that's the concern, because I know right now we estimated 9% for next fiscal year. Are they typically close, or are we off by 50%? And that's about, I got one other thing I'd like to ask. I think it is the county of Riverside, La Quinta, and Indio, just last night, I guess it got fermented, creating this power authority that they're looking at. And my question is, how does that affect or impact the funds that we paid into IDD for what they're trying to do for us, or any other thing going forward? Thank you.
The next speaker card I have is Brad Anderson. I'm not sure if he's still here. I don't think so. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 3A who did not submit a speaker card? No additional speakers.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I'll take a stab at answering
Yes,
some of
please.
those comments. So the Sheriff's Department estimate, they're usually pretty close. And so historically, so let's use this current year as an example. When we got the estimate last year for what it would be right now, they told us 7.5%, and the actual was 7.03%. So they're usually pretty close. In years where you see maybe a bigger variance is when they're in their negotiations and they don't quite have a picture of what that looks like. You know, 80% of that rate is probably the cost of the officers. So when they're in cycles where they have those multi-year agreements with the unions in place and they know that they're not going to be negotiating, they can usually estimate to a greater degree, but typically they're pretty close in most years. The IID JPA. So that JPA actually sits on top of IID. And so the idea behind the JPA is you're going to add to the electrical rate in the IID service territory by the cost of this JPA. And so if a community, like some of the communities in the East Valley, decide to join that JPA is going to have costs because you're creating an entity, and then they're going to want to fund some infrastructure improvements. And so they're going to start covering their cost of the JPA plus collecting extra money for the capacity enhancements that they want to do. And so current customers and future customers will pay on their electric bill the IID rate plus the JPA adder to the rates. And so, if you're in a community that is wholly served by IID, these capacity issues are very significant. The estimates that we are getting right now from IID is $40+ million to build one substation. And some of those communities have 7, 8 substations that they need to build. And so for those communities that are wholly served by IID, that's a very large dollar amount. In Rancho Mirage, we have a very small area that's serviced by IID. And so we are taking just a little bit of maybe a different approach because we can afford to do so. If we were wholly served by IID and we needed multiple substations, then it would be very difficult to find a way to finance the needed capacity improvements. So kind of, being that we're such a small area in Rancho Mirage that is IID, we're taking a look at that JPA, but we don't need to be an early implementer of it. We're going to kind of, watch it at a staff level and see how it develops and what they're able to do. So for us, getting this next substation's very critical for our affordable housing. In the large scheme of things, would we have got involved if it wasn't for the affordable housing? Probably not. So this was a pretty specific purpose on which we said, hey, we want to go fix those issues. Doesn't mean it's not important, and I think even to, IID's credit is they have recognized within their rate structure that they need to capture more for infrastructure and the investment within their infrastructure. And so IID has passed a board policy that's been a change from the past, which is kind of how we got here. But they have started to increase IID rates to help with some of these infrastructure issues. So, within those communities that are wholly served, right, customers will pay the IID rate plus whatever is added on to the rate for that JPA. So right now, we're kind of, Rancho Mirage is taking a wait and see approach because we don't face some of the same issues as communities that are wholly served. I think that was it.
Okay. I think that took care of the public comments. Now let's go to council comments. I'll start on my left. Any questions at all? Eve?
No questions.
Okay, Michael?
I just wanted to say that I'm proud of our city for having such a strong reserve position. And while I would like to see us maintain that, the fact that we are running surpluses in an operational sense, I think is reassuring for us. And that the reserves are there for a reason. And that's what these reasons are, and that's why we need to spend the money as you've described. I want to thank Kofi for an excellent presentation. I don't know if, and I did have a question about the substation. We're looking at $5 million over the next couple of years. Do we think that that's going to be sufficient, and what will be long-term ramifications on that?
It's sufficient for our affordable housing. There are obviously other developers out there that are getting the same letters that our affordable housing developers got. The nice thing about this initial investment is it's going to put immediate capacity in the ground, and then it also is providing for future growth. And so this substation's being built to a capacity that over time you could add even more transformers and add even more capacity. So if in the future, a group of developers wanted to get together and go fund the next transformer, all the infrastructure's there, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to do that because we made this initial investment into the substation. So it by no means solves the problems for capacity issues within the IID service territory for Rancho Mirage, but it does provide a pathway for groups of developers to get together, and now that the base infrastructure is put in, take the next steps of expanding that substation in the future.
Thank you. I did have one more question. I don't know if it's the appropriate time now to discuss community involvement and charitable giving. Is that something that? Ahead. Well, I know in the budget plan we were thinking about restructuring how we give charitable donations, and I'm all for that. I think it should be restructured. However, I would like to make sure that we do protect some of the recipients. I'm especially concerned about some of the smaller charities. I used to run a small 501c3. If I were to get $5,000 from Rancho Mirage, I would have thought, hallelujah. You get another month of operation or maybe 2 months operation. So I would like for us to think of a way to make sure that we are able to sustain that.
Thank you, Michael. I concur with that. I think that I think we all pretty much feel that we have been extremely charitable as far as the city is concerned. And I don't think that any of us want to decrease that level of giving. It's just a question of how we do it in the most practical and effective way of doing it. And that's something that we will discuss.
Mr. Mayor, on that fact, I'd like to also concur with Councilmember O'Keefe that I'd like to look for creative ways to continue to do what we can for nonprofits that serve citizenry and our residents in ways that we as a city cannot or do not. But I'd like to look for more creative ways to do it as well.
Concurred. And I too, by the way, want to compliment Kofi, everyone that worked on the budget, Isaiah, our directors. It is a Herculean task to put all of this together. And again, I realize this sounds incredibly self-serving. However, we are very, very fortunate to have a city that is able to have reserves that we've been able to establish over time. And no better example of that than the Great Plates program during COVID, where we were able to come to the rescue of a number of our restaurants that would not be in business today if we hadn't been able to do that. So again, a great deal of applause to staff and everyone that has contributed. With that, Councilmember Downs?
I do have a couple of thoughts. Well, first, again, thank you, Kofi. Thank you, Isaiah. Thank you to all the directors for all your hard work on this budget. We much appreciate it. Can you show me the page or take me to the page, Kofi, where we talk about things like the SAF funds and also whatever we have contributed to the McCallum in the past? What page is that?
That will be page 51.
Okay, so
It's the Special Programs Division.
yeah. So if I'm looking at this correctly, we're not suggesting that we're going to do anything different with the Jocelyn Center. We'll continue with that $100,000 contribution. I'm guessing that's part of an agreement with the other Cove cities as to how much we contribute to the Jocelyn Center. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's based on the Cove formula. So that's driven by population. So typically Rancho Mirage is going to be 24% within that. There is a slight change that's being proposed with that this year. So if you look at the previous year amounts, 1 year we actually gave close to 110,000.
Right.
And so what the proposal is for the 100,000 is to treat that as a cap. And so currently, based on what's being discussed, the operational component that is being presented at a future Cove Commission meeting would put Rancho Mirage's operational commitment to about $89,000.
Okay.
And by establishing a $100,000 budget, then $11,000 would be left over for any capital needs that they have.
Okay.
And so basically by establishing that 100,000 cap, if they choose to keep increasing their operational contribution from the city, and then that would eventually eat into the capital side that we're eating into each year. And so it would kind of protect the city over the long run of that capital budget seems to be getting larger and larger.
Okay.
And so there are some quite hefty capital proposals that are being talked about right now. And it's at the tune of about, estimates are between $800,000 and $1 million. So you're talking about potentially $240,000 just in capital when you apply the formula to Rancho Mirage. So a little bit different in the fact that we're going to say we won't go over 100,000.
Okay. So account 7497, special contributions, $300,000 last year down to $28,000 this year. Where did the almost $200,000 go? Where did we cut?
So we have established annual long-term commitments for the Living Desert and Eisenhower Medical Center of $100,000 each. And then it was 50,000 for the McCollum Theater.
Okay.
Those were eliminated.
Where did the SAF funds come out of? Which account?
That account was a standalone account, and so since that program
So
was...
it's disappeared. It's not on this page at all.
Correct. Right. Because it has zero budget for...
Now I understand why I couldn't find it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I guess that maybe if I hear my colleagues correctly, that there is some concern about eliminating those SAF funds altogether, and there is some concern about taking McCallum from $50,000 a year down to zero. Am I correct? Don't all speak up at once.
No, I think you are correct, but I don't think that that account is being taken down to zero.
Yes, it has.
McCollum has been taken down to zero.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, just that one entity.
Yeah.
Well, that's been taken down to zero, and also the Living Desert. And what else do we take down to zero? Eisenhower.
So the reason those... so let me just clarify. McCollum has had an established $50,000 in our budget, and so that is being, in this cycle, proposed to be eliminated. The $100,000 for the Living Desert and the $100,000 for Eisenhower, those were long-term pledges of $100,000 per year. The proposal is to satisfy those this year, which is why you wouldn't see them in the budget again.
Okay.
That's my point. They're not being eliminated. They're merely being accelerated.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so I guess the only concern that I have then with respect to special funding for special projects like that would be the McCallum and the SAF program. And I would be in favor of finding a way to continue to participate in both of those. Don't know how we do it, but I think we ought to put some money back in this budget for those issues.
And we can have those discussions.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, right now is, as good as time as any. So
I guess it is.
That's entirely what this meeting is for, right? So within the context of this meeting, staff has prepared a preliminary budget. And so
I'm not proposing we blow it up. I'm just talking about around, $150,000 or so.
Yeah, so this would be the time for the council to say, yeah, we concur with that, and then staff can take that and add those things back into this budget, right?
Based upon the temperature that I'm feeling, I would recommend they be added back into the budget.
I agree.
I would think that there's creative ways to look at the numbers, that maybe some of it would be added back into the budget, but I think we need to review who and where and why differently than we've done in the past, with the mindset of, are they serving residents and to what extent? Is it quality services that we're funding? Are we funding organizations that are viable and sustainable too? So our money is going long-term to something that is real and not living on fumes. And then I would also talk about sliding those numbers possibly down as we look at big expenditures that really go to the residents, like the IID substation, which we know are necessary, affordable housing, which we know are necessary and priorities. Doesn't mean that I don't support the nonprofits in this community, because I do, and I think everyone knows that, but I would also like it where we feel like we, as a body all together, agree on where the money goes. And possibly we then move some of that money for those of us that have particular things in our heart that speak to us and we have passion about, into those individual categories where we can promote that giving directly ourselves individually, and maybe move some of that money there so we can make those choices around the nonprofits that are close to our heart without everyone having to agree.
Sure. I think one of the things we ought to remember is the way that the SAF funds, those contributions have worked, is it's been roughly about $100,000 a year that goes into the SAF program. And for the last, in the past, it had been the case prior to the last couple of years that the way in which those funds were distributed, it was a subcommittee of the council who got together to sort that out. The last couple of years, it's been a mayoral decision. And the last couple of years, I've made those decisions as to how those funds were distributed. So what we might, if I hear you correctly, I think you're suggesting that maybe there's a different way than the mayor just makes the decision about how those funds are spent.
Yeah, I think we all have passion around, and I'm not saying we're not aligned in what we think is important in our valley, but I also think in the ways that the world may be heading, we may look as to where we can have a more substantial impact on certain nonprofits where we know there are gaps, seniors, children, et cetera, that directly impact the quality of life of our residents. So we may just need to have a broader conversation, and it may just work with one mayor because we rotate. I don't believe, and I'm new enough to not know how it all works and to admit that openly, but and I've been in Michael's position too with the nonprofit where $5,000 was the critical difference between the 30th of the month and the 1st of the month, or a payroll and not making a payroll. So I understand that, but I want to know that what we do has greater impact, and especially for our constituents, because that's what I think they're asking us for as well. Sounds to me like if we do decide that it's a subcommittee that determines how we spend SAF funds, you might have just talked yourself into being appointed to that subcommittee. The person who raises their hand and gets to be the chair, that's already happened to me before. That's how I got in this seat, I think. Well, I think that we should continue with a cap of $100,000 in SAF funds.
Well, could I just interject right
Please
there?
do.
That it's $100,000 generally is what it is, but then there's also $25,000 that each council member has in discretionary income.
$5,000 each.
$5,000, I mean, times 5 is $25,000. Plus, there was the community relations budget, which was currently $215,000, and it's gone down to $200,000. So I think you have to look at the whole pie. So when we come up with how we're going to creatively hold on to what's important.
So as staff is taking notes, so it sounds like perhaps we could take some of this $100,000 and reallocate it into your support for nonprofit accounts. So thereby, you would go from $5,000 to some number that the council would like to see in that account. And that would be done per council member as it is now, right? So if you have something, if each council member has a specific nonprofit that they're passionate about, that is potentially, or going to events and things of that nature, that is what those accounts are used for now. I guess the question that I would have is on a broader nonprofit giving program, kind of with where SAF ended, it from a staff perspective, we'd like to see either a new nonprofit giving program, and you don't have to have every answer. You can just say plug in this amount, and then the council can figure out that broader program, or we stick within an existing program that we have and just, like I said, take this $100,000 and establish it into an existing program, because SAF began to have challenges in the later years because of kind of the way that the guidelines were written with how that program was being implemented. So we don't have to have every answer today on how that program would work. We're just talking about a budget number, right? So
I think that's our point. I think the point is that we all feel inclined to maintain that figure, to maintain that budget. How we allocate the funds, we can determine among ourselves. Whether it's a committee of 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it might be, I think we can come up with the structure. What we're trying to do today is to make certain that that figure is included in the budget for the next 2 periods. Is that correct?
So to make it easy for the council, what if staff did this? So on page On page 51,
Our job isn't to make yours easy, by the way.
true. On page 51 for account 7458, titled Support for Nonprofits, we will establish that 100,000 there.
That would be fine with me.
Do I get a word in?
We turned off your mic, so.
Yeah.
No, I never had it on. I appreciate everything that's been said today, and it's really important. As you know, this SAF fund was established how many years ago? A long time ago, and rules were different, ideas were different, and it was always with great intention. And in this crazy world that we're living in right now, and a lot of uncertainties, I really think that we all have the opportunity to examine this, as Councilmember Fromberg-Edelstein had stated. Let's review this. Charity begins at home, and and I don't look at this as getting rid of it. I look at it as an opportunity to evolve because our community is growing. And so if we could look at this, see how we could, to your point, Eve, make a greater impact, make our dollars stretch, but really let's see how we can make things change. Because as we talked earlier about the Jocelyn Senior Center, when I sat on that board, I kept asking, how many Rancho Mirage residents have the opportunity? They have phenomenal programs there, but how many residents actually know about it? A lot of residents don't realize that we participate. That is our senior center. And come to find out, only 285 residents. So I'm working with Councilmember O'Keefe to heighten that awareness with the Jocelyn Senior Center so that our seniors have the benefit of all the programs that are available. And if there's a lack of transportation, I already have a commitment from Sunline to help with that. So these are the things that we're looking at. How do we maximize the potential, and all for the benefit of our residents? That's why we're here, to improve the quality of life. So I think we have a good baseline, and I think it's going to take some discussion, and we might have some additions here. How we get there, that's how we'll reformulate it. But I think it's imperative that it's not one person's decision. I think with most minds coming together and ideas and collaboration, I think we can have a great successful opportunity here for nonprofits and serving nonprofits that serve our residents here in Rancho Mirage.
So let me make sure I understand that. So I think the basic idea we talked about is $100,000 goes into account 7458. And what we now need to do is we now need to sort out how we're going to handle that. We don't need to sort that out this afternoon.
We're dealing with a structure.
We can have some ongoing discussions about that. Okay, that's fine with me. I think that we should do that, and let's put that discussion to bed. But that does not resolve the issue about $50,000 for McCallum. So let's talk about that. I'm in favor of continuing the $50,000 for the McCallum.
I love the McCollum Theater, but what I'd like to see is, I have a couple of questions. The programs that are made available to us, can they be more substantial? The other question is I was told that whatever tickets are not sold are made readily available to our seniors in our senior housing department, and I think that's phenomenal. However, when do they get notified? The day of? Because every time I go in, I've gone to those presentations, there's no one there. So something's missing. There are a lot of empty seats. I'm not saying that we should end this program. I'm saying if we're going to fund this, how do we make it, again, beneficial to our residents? If we have seniors or any members of our community that are not able to afford to go to those presentations, certainly they know, even maybe a week ahead of time, if the tickets are being sold and there's going to be a block of tickets that might be available, to give us the opportunity, to work out that communication. How can we get people there to benefit from it? To have a empty theater, I think we can spend our $50,000 a little bit differently. So
I don't mind having a negotiation with them about what we might get in return for that contribution, and that's fine with me. But I think that we should continue to be a contributor to a stellar cultural institution in this desert.
A lot of it's going to come down to when they don't know all the time exactly what sales are going to be or how successful they are. And so they've gone into a new program whereby if sales don't reach a certain level on their programs, they now discount the price of those tickets to a certain level to try to get it out and get, more of an audience. And I think it will require a different structure and a different negotiation with McCallum on how we get access to the unsold tickets.
I have two thoughts. Number one is we just approved a study for the amphitheater on how to improve access, attendance, and programming at our own amphitheater. So I'd like to see what comes out of that. And if there are also some opportunities for some partnerships with McCollum and some of their programs at our amphitheater, easier to get our seniors to possibly, and our residents to get to. I recognize that's a big idea, and I don't claim to know every part of it, but I would like to see what comes out of that data collection. The other thing that I would like to see, and it's just an idea too from McCollum, and again, this is a conversation to have with them, in connection with the donation, is, for example, Acrisure keeps a certain amount of community tickets back, and they sell those tickets day out of the box office at $20 so that hockey is accessible for everyone in our community at every level. So I would like to know if something like that is also possible at McCollum for the top tier shows, that our residents would like to see some of those traveling show musicals that are very hard to get to, and if they would be willing to work with us on, I'm not asking for half their theater, obviously, and I realize they have a bottom line, and I understand what they do. And I believe in what the McCollum does. They are our regional theater here, the same with CV Rep and all of our other theater companies, and they're bringing top-rate shows and top-rate entertainment that doesn't require a 2-hour drive away, which is great for us. But I would like to make sure they're serving, again, as in the same thing we say with Jocelyn, serving our populations in the way that we anticipate they are when we write them in a certain amount of money. And I think that necessitates us having a longer conversation with them about it. I have no issue with putting some amount of money back in. I'm open to what this, again, this is where I'm new to that donation, so I don't profess to understand how it's used and why, but I'd like to understand more.
Could I just say that I love the McCallum, and I think it's a great thing to do. However, maybe we could restructure how we participate with them and how we donate and how we cooperate with them. My priority will still be small charities to make sure that they get some of that SAF funds. And if I could just shift gears for a moment, I would be remiss if I didn't say as a former cultural commissioner in the city, and since Mr. Espinoza is here in the audience, that on account number 7875, we fought for many years to get that from 25,000 up to 37,000. I hate for it to go back. I'd like for us to make sure that we maintain the Cultural Commission's budget as is. They had extraordinary programming this year, and I'd like to see that continue.
that's okay. No, that's all right. No, I think the McCollum Theater is one of the jewels of our desert, and we've been great partners with them, and they with us. But as with everything, I think sometimes we need to take another look to see how we can tweak it,
Agreed.
Improve, and hopefully we can have a mutual understanding to kind of regroup and see how not only can we participate, but that our most importantly, our citizens have the opportunity to participate.
I guess I didn't catch that. So when I took a look through the budget book, so The Cultural Commission has had 37.5 in the last couple of years and is down to 25. Is that what you're telling me, Michael?
According to this proposal.
Okay, and you want it to go back up to, how about if we do this then? Let's take the McCallum from 50 down to 37.5, and let's give the Cultural Commission 37.5. How's that?
I'd do that all day long.
I love that.
I still think we need to talk with the McCollum.
Right.
Oh,
We've had a
without a
long
doubt.
time partnership with them, but I would love to see our Cultural Commission continue to produce what they've done so well, and it's been so well received from the public.
Yes, the library is a cultural center here. We've given it 1,000 names of what happens at our library. Cultural centers, add that to the list. And that commission works hard to get programming that everyone enjoys, especially children and families here, which is a vital part of the population that gets forgotten at times. So I completely endorse
so that
putting
sound
that
like-
budget at 37.5, however we plan to do it.
But I also think, to your point earlier, I'm sorry to keep coming back, but I think we need to take a look at that study for our amphitheater. That's our, the library is just a wonderful gift to the community, and so is our amphitheater. And as I mentioned earlier, we are a community that is continually putting one foot in front of the other, evolving, and our wonderful community appreciates everything we do, but they're going to be looking for more. And it's our charge to make sure that we provide, continuing to put in that quality of life, and that includes the amphitheater. So I think we have a little bit more discussion to do, but I think we can get it all accomplished.
So can we conclude then that, subject to additional review of the use of the amphitheater based on the results of the study, that the concept we want to go with is 37.5 to the Cultural Commission and 37.5 to the McCallum? Is that the conclusion we're kind of coming to?
I'd like to just interject here that I think out of respect for our relationship with the McCallum, that we need to have, before we make a definitive decision, we need to have conversations with them.
Okay.
Because we have a healthy and long-established relationship with them, so I don't want to just make a decision like that without consultation and listening and having a two-way conversation.
And they also have a budget as well. And
Indeed. Mr. City Manager,
Well, so you guys are saying two different things.
Yeah, we are.
So
We're allowed to do that.
yeah, you guys can do whatever you want. So just keep in mind, what I will tell you guys is, the budget is an estimate, right? And so if you had established, hey, let's put McCollum back in at 37.5, and then let's take the Cultural Commission back up to 37.5, if the council dug into it at a later date and found out, hey, what we're getting from the McCollum is fantastic, and we're going to go back up to that 50. That's a simple mid-year adjustment, right? And so, I wouldn't get so caught up on the
Number.
3750 versus 50, right? Because whenever you guys make that decision, to have that minor of an adjustment in a mid-year budget cycle is going to be pretty easy to overcome based on the information you have. So if it's okay with the council, what staff will do is add McCollum back in as a number 3 on account 7497, and we will reflect 37.5. The Cultural Commission budget, which is 7875, will go back up to the 37.5. And then, if it's appropriate at mid-year, based on the council's digging into the details and seeing what you're going to get, and is it what we want? If that number's at 50, then we just come back in a mid-year budget adjustment and ask for the minor amendment to that budget.
I think that's a workable plan. Council agree with that?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, I think you have concurrence with that.
Great.
Any other comments?
I do have just a general comment. I want to just refer back to one of the screens that, you don't have to pull it up, Kofi, but one of the screens that Kofi had in the early part of his presentation. And he showed us that 3 of our expense categories for law enforcement services, for fire services, and for insurance costs went up 60% in the last 4 years, whereas the revenues to this city only went up 14%. So the cost for those three things went up $11 million, but the revenues in this city only went up $4.7 million. I think we need to look at that very carefully. I think we need to burn that into our brains. I think we need to understand that if those costs continue, something's got to change. I don't know what it is, but it's clear to me that something has to change at some point in the future if those costs continue to rise at that kind of a rate. And there are other costs that we're going to need to consider in the future that we need to plan for, like I understand and appreciate that the fire station is not an expense that we need to worry about next year or the year after, even 3 years down the line or 4 years down the line. It's going to take some time for it to get there, but it's going to get there. So we need to be aware that there are some other important and large capital expenses that we're going to have to face. But if these basic costs continue to increase at this rate, we're going to have to revisit that somehow or another. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm pretty sure we'll figure it out.
Well,
I don't think the goal is to kick the can down the road, and I don't think that's what we're talking about. Those numbers are alarming, and they're essential, right? Public safety is foremost what people look for from their city, and roads, right?
Yep.
So we know that. And but I think I'm glad we have time to become creative and to think outside the box on solutions. But I don't see this budget as kicking that can down the road. Yeah.
Well, we're not. Now, keep in mind, we're dealing with a 2-year budget now. We can't predict the future. We know costs are going to continue to increase. Our task today is a review of the 2-year budget, and that's really what we're doing here. We're not going beyond that at the present time. Sure, we can prognosticate knowing costs are going to continue to increase. But right now we're dealing with a 2-year budget, and that's what we want to deal with, and that's what we want to approve. Any other comments? If there are no other comments.
So maybe just quickly before you end this meeting, if there's no other comments or questions from the council on the budget.
Hold on.
Did we have to have public comment?
We already did.
We already did.
Yeah, so, this is just a study session, right? So there's no action today. Obviously, there was some concurrence amongst the council on some nonprofit giving. And so that will be added into the preliminary budget. And then what happens next is the first regular city council meeting in June. The 2-year budget will be presented to the council for action. And so what that means is a resolution's prepared to adopt year one, budget year one, and then tentatively approve year two, subject to a review by the council. So think of year two almost like a projection. And then a year from now, when we have a year's worth of experience and better data, we come in and we take that projection and we update it based on that year of experience or something that came up that wasn't in the budget or something that was in the budget that we want to take out. So there's another review before we move forward with year two. Again, that would be the same process where the council would get it. Here are the adjustments. Okay, adopt these adjustments, and then that's the budget for year two. So that tentative approval of year two, subject to a review, that's the purpose of that language, is just to make sure that the council sees it again before it goes into effect. So that will come forward first meeting in June.
But it looks like we haven't given you any headaches that we can't get that done by the first week in June.
Not yet.
Just a little SAF and McCallum issue. That's about it.
We are happy with that.
Okay, good.
Thank you for everything.
I think that concludes our comments.
Yep, we're done.
With that, the study session is concluded.